Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed panelists, and fellow changemakers. On behalf of the Royal Patron and Chairman and Merdeka Award Trust Board of Trustees, it is my honor to welcome all of you for the first ever Merdeka Award Talks, Borneo Talk series in Kuching, Sarawak, a land where heritage is lived and celebrated. We thank the land of the Hornbills, Bumi Kenyalang, for its warm hospitality. From its rivers and rainforests to the creativity and spirit of its people, Sarawak truly reflects Malaysians' rich cultural heritage and makes the perfect home for today's gathering. Today, we gather not just to celebrate creativity, but to reaffirm our shared commitment to nationhood through culture. It is our shared responsibility to create spaces where creativity strives, where cultural identity empowers the next generation, and where the collective dream of a united, vibrant nation is realized. The future of our nation depends on how well we nurture this collective treasure. The Merdeka Award Talk series is a platform that continues to convene experts and change makers from across Malaysia's vibrant art, science, education, and various other sectors in fostering a culture of excellence. With today's theme, inspired by ancestors, driven by dreams, you are the next story. We are invited to listen deeply to the songs of the sape, the textures of textile, and the wisdom of those who walk between tradition and innovation. Since its founding in August 2007, almost 18 years ago, by Petronas and Shell, the Merdeka Award Trust has stood as a beacon of excellence, honoring Malaysians whose contributions have uplifted our nation. Through our signature program, which is the Merdeka Award and the Merdeka Award Grant for International Attachment, we continue to champion innovation, thought leadership, and global perspective. Nation building is not only about infrastructure or policy. It is also about nurturing the creative spirit that binds us together. And in the process, culture is not static. It evolves, adapts, and inspires, shaped by courageous individuals who are blending the wisdom of our ancestors with the opportunities of today. Today, we are extremely honored to be joined by three inspiring speakers. We have Datin Rosemarie Wong, Alena Murang, and Marcus, who flew all the way from Netherlands just to be with us today. Who will share their journey in helping to carry Sarawak's cultural legacy forward while shaping new possibilities for our nation's collective future. Datin Rosemarie Wong, a visionary heritage entrepreneur, president of the Sarawak Heritage Society and project director of the Ranee Artisan Gallery. Alena Murang, a trailblazing musician and composer, and one of the first women to professionally play the sapi. Marcus, a textile artist whose remarkable works in the Netherlands beautifully weave elements of ancestral Bornean traditions. And last but not least, our moderator, the vibrant and beautiful Freda Liu, a dynamic broadcast journalist and host of The Shift of Asia. Following today's session, the Borneo Talk series will continue its journey in Kota Kinabalu next month in Sabah. So ladies and gentlemen, as we approach the 15th edition of the Merdeka Award next year, let us remember culture does not stand still. It grows, adapts, and evolves. It is a living flame passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. Together, let us explore how our heritage and creativity can shape not only who we are, but who we become. It's one people, one nation. Thank you for being part of this story. I hand it over to now, Freda. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Freda, and it's an honor to be here, to be home. I am from Sarawak. I'm going to introduce our panelists in just a moment, but let me perhaps set the stage for our discussion. And it's always exciting to be home, and we've got to start talking before the rain overtakes us, right? Okay. Anyway, So, as we were saying, right, Malaysia's story is woven from many threads: our languages, our lands, our lineages, and like any tapestry, its beauty lies in how these threads come together. Today's theme, inspired by ancestors driven by dreams, you are the next story, reminds us that nationhood isn't something fixed in history books. It's something we continue to create every day through our art, our choices, and our courage to imagine. And of course, our lineup of panelists will be able to share this. Think about it for a minute. Nation building is not only about infrastructure or policy, it's also about nurturing the creative spirit that binds us together. And in this process, culture is not static, it evolves, adapts, and inspires, shaped by courageous individuals who are blending the wisdom of our ancestors with the opportunities of today. So today, we're going to explore how our heritage and creativity can shape not only who we are, but who we become as one people, one nation. And think about it, when you travel, what do? You go to the museums, you look at the art, you listen to the music, right? And that's something that is the essence of any nation. So again, today we're honored to be joined by three inspiring speakers. We have Marcus Kueh, Alena Murang, and Datin Rosemarie Wong, who will share how their journeys are helping to carry Sarawak's legacy forward and while shaping new possibilities for our nation's collective future. So let's welcome our panelists up on stage. Okay, thank you. And there will be time for Q&A later, right? So look forward to your questions. I'm going to start off with a motherhood question, and that Malaysia's diversity is often described as our greatest strength. I think, we as Sarawakians know about this. I think we experience this. Yet it also challenges us to find unity in difference, right? So how do you see the arts, whether through music, design, or storytelling, as a force for nation building? Marcus said, please don't ask me first all the time. So Marcus, can you please answer?
Um, oh, well, I mean, when it comes down to art, I always think that, when you're experiencing art, you're not just experiencing a work, but you're also experiencing a story. When I personally go to museums, I try to also understand what is the story behind why this artist created this art. And I feel like I was just explaining as well. Sometimes, like when you read something, that's how we understand how stories are being transmitted by reading. But sometimes there are certain things that language, in terms of like words, is hard to express. Perhaps it's on the materiality of things. Perhaps it's in like the familiarity of the visual. I think that is important for a nation to be able to encapsulate the stories, because it's showing where the headspace is, in terms of where the humans are, what they're concerned about, what makes them, what moves them. Yeah. And I think that when you don't have outlets like this for people to experience, sometimes life becomes a bit more monotonous. I think work is very important,
Right,
but having spaces to process emotions is also quite important.
right.
Yeah.
When we talk about developed nation, it's not just the hardware, it's the software as well, right? Datin?
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Freda. Um, for me, cultural heritage is a glue that binds the community together. It's fostered shared sense of identity, of history, of values, through tangible and intangible heritage. Um, Even through things like landmarks, for example, right? Or language, or traditions. Common grounds provide social cohesion, sense of belonging. So it is very important, the art is very important. It's about storytelling of our past and the present and the future. Now, for example, the Iban textiles, right, the Puak Kumbu, it is not just about pretty patterns. Each pattern and each motif on there is actually linked back to the history, the culture of the people, the identity of the community. So they all mean something, aside from it looking like a pretty piece of textile. Take, for example, the suluk basket. That's a utilitarian farming basket Oh, there you go. A utilitarian farming basket that they would carry into the paddy fields. Now, besides being a utilitarian item, it is their way of life. This is the Iban tribe. This is their way of life. That item, that basket alone, is actually a material culture. It tells about the material culture of the people, whether it's made from bamboo, rattan, bamban, resam, there's so many different materials. It is the traditional knowledge of how they reap this material to weave the baskets. It is also about community resilience and the role of women within the community. These are all women, by the way, going into they're all women. Now, art in every sense is a tapestry of nation building. Everyone here would know this song, Bekikis Bulu Betis, right? Who here doesn't know it? Everybody knows it. Okay, this song by Andrew Ngala. Now, the literal meaning, for those who don't know Iban, the literal meaning means to let the hair on your legs be shaved off. But it is actually an idiom of saying go to the extremes or do anything to achieve a goal in life. The story of this song is actually, the lyrics is actually about a man's relentless pursuit of a woman that he wants to marry. But the song is widely embraced by people, not just in Sarawak. It started in Sarawak, but now even in Semenanjung, right? We get them singing and dancing to it. It's now popular at events like weddings, gawai, celebrations. I think the catchy nature of the song is what binds people together. They sing together, they dance together, regardless of their ethnic background. Because recently, it was Dayang Nafisa that sang this song at the 33rd ASEAN Council event, and everybody got up to dance, regardless of race. So the arts, in this sense, music and dance, is something that binds the community together. Alena will be able to tell you about music.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I personally have felt music bringing people together all over the world. Even in this room, who doesn't listen to music? You know, it's such a big part of our lives, and I think the word nationhood is such a big, heavy word, especially these days. And I think what I've seen is that musical cultures in Malaysia have they allow us to kind of have an insight into other cultures who maybe we haven't had the chance to meet because we can't travel. You know, for example, I learned about Kelantanese culture through Mat Yong and Nasi Kerabu. You know, and I think as well with singing in Kelabit and Kenyah songs, an audience can learn so much more about Kelabit people and Kenyah people, even though they've never been there before. And I think, you know, we're such a diverse nation, and there is racism everywhere. And I think music is really something. It's a very powerful thing that can really bind us together.
I just wanted, for those of you who don't know you or all of you a little bit more, this is a bit of your personal story. You know, how each of you found your creative voice within this larger story. I mean, like how you got into this space. Perhaps we'll start with you, Alena.
How I got into this space. So I started learning cultural dancing at Dayak Cultural Foundation when I was 6 years old, thanks to Mum. I hated it. I didn't want to go. And obviously we danced to Sapek music. So when I was 10 years old, we approached Uncle Matthew. Uncle Matthew, where are you? To teach us Sapek. And apparently we were his first group of students. And again, I think that's thanks to our mums who pushed us to learn Sapek. But again, it was just like going to tuition, you know, you go to math tuition, you go to ballet class, you go to Sapek class. I didn't realize I could make a career out of it. I don't look like Uncle Matthew, who was, you know, traveling the world. I thought that's what people wanted to see. And then I moved to KL for a corporate job. And I brought my sapek with me. That time, my sapek didn't even have an electric pickup. It didn't have a strap. You know, it wasn't ready for performance. But I would still bring it to open mic nights. People in my office knew I played sapes. I would play for company dinner sometimes, and my colleague would sit next to me with a mic to mic up the sape. And I think, after a while, people learned that I played sape. They were very curious about the songs. They were very curious what One Malaysia meant. So it became kind of a gateway for people to find out more about East Malaysia.
Right. And for you, Datin, having started the Heritage Society and as well, what was your story, getting into this space?
Well, the Heritage Society was quite recent.
Mm-hmm.
I stepped up as a president of the society 4 years ago, but I've actually been a member since it was incorporated in 2006. So next year is our 20th anniversary. I've always had a deep love for old buildings and old furniture. My husband, who's sitting there, will tell you I keep bringing rubbish home and junk home, and he keeps telling me, stop bringing junk home to the house. But I actually have this really deep love for old items because I think that I love the patina on old buildings.
Right.
I love the texture on a worn out piece of furniture or timber. I think there's so many stories, like they say, if walls could talk, the stories they would tell. Now, we travel, we're all guilty of this. We travel overseas to see other people's heritage, to see other people's buildings, to see other people's culture. Right here in Sarawak and in Malaysia, we're sitting on a wealth of heritage that we are not appreciating. And every other day we hear of a building being torn down. Why, right? So for me, stepping up to this role was to be able to preserve a piece of our heritage and history for the next generation. Now, I was very hesitant when I was approached to take on the role as a president because I know that there's so many buildings I want to save, and I know that it's going to be impossible to save it all. But the society is about awareness, advisory, and advocacy. And I thought, okay, if I step up on this role, I must walk the talk. Now, for those of you who know, we have been championing the old nurses' quarters, the salvation of the old nurses' quarters, for 3 years now. And why is it so important for us to make sure? This is it. So this building was built in the 1940s. This is what it looks like now. Yes, I climbed through the fence and through the undergrowth to get into the building to see the state of this building. It is such a beautiful building built in the 1940s, naturally ventilated, cross ventilation, perfect example of architecture in those days. I think that we need to fight for our heritage. I'm lucky that I had the guts. I went straight up to the premier and I said to him, do you know this building's slated for demolition? Please, you need to save it. It is not 100 years old. So in accordance with our ordinance, any building that's not 100 years old is not of heritage value. Neither is it gazetted. But it is of sentimental value to the many, many nurses who served the nation.
My late mother-in-law was in the staff quarters, so there you go.
Yeah. So the previous President James actually rounded up the nurses and got them to sit round the coffee for tea. And the stories they told of the time spent here, the history and the advancement of how our medical history in Sarawak was built through their hands, through their hard work. We felt that it is important to save this building, to honor them, right? So this is where we came in. I think responsible stewardship of heritage, to honor the past, to celebrate the present, and to enhance the future, embrace the future.
Marcus, starting from Kuching High.
Ah. Yeah,
I'm teasing him because he's like my son. Anyway.
Yeah, I started from Kuching High, and then actually my first study was in graphic design. And I've been doing graphic design I've been a graphic design student for 8 years. I started from KL, and when I was in Datin, it's a story that I always tell, because it's a very defining story. my lecturer asked me, have you ever thought of what type of graphic designer do you want to be? So of course I was 18. I was like, I want to be like a graphic designer from New York. And then cues like some names. But she's like, why do you think that you can be a graphic designer from New York? I don't think you can be that. I'm like, why? It's like, because a graphic designer from New York produces New York graphic design. And you're Malaysian, why do you think that you can do graphic design like a New Yorker better than a New Yorker? And I feel like that threw me into like a very deep existential crisis. That was when I started to do work of, instead of looking at references, to go into the field and study what the local visual culture is about. And that naturally led itself into a lot of the craft work in Sarawak, because I'm from Sarawak. And that's also something that perhaps at that time Semenanjung was also very interested in. They were interested in who I was as a Sarawakian. A lot of times the research I bring into Semenanjung, they always kind of gravitated towards, and it's always like, oh, I didn't know. And that always kind of popped a lot of questions in my head. It's like, how can we be from the same nation? We have been independent for 60 years, and like I know everything about KL. I know everything about the formation of Malaysia, but no one from Semenanjung, well, not everyone, but there's still a lot of misunderstanding of what it means to be Sarawakian, right? I was in class and people were still asking me, Marcos, do you live on tree houses? Do you have orang-utans in your backyard? And I'm like, no, we have shopping malls as well. And those are the starting points of like diving into a deeper research. 2018, I moved to the Netherlands after working in the industry for a bit, uh, as well in Kuching. And then the questions got expanded. That was the first time when I encountered the word decolonization. And then it became like complicated, right? It became like a larger topic as well. But it came from, I would say, like, if I were to summarize my practice, even up till now, 2025, it is coming from a place where I'm trying to also learn about myself by understanding your past. And I learn about myself as well when I'm in a position in the West of how I relate to the larger history of my past as well. So it's just a journey of figuring who I am, and then people are interested in that, and suddenly it's a career.
Right, and suddenly it's and it's been an interesting career, right? And your Kenyalang circus, is this it? That has
Yeah.
traveled around the world, so bold, colorful, and deeply reflective of what it means to be Bornean and Malaysian. And what have you learned about your identity through that process? Are you getting more clarity, or it's still a process of discovery?
The basis of Kerala Circus and how I explain to people, it's a bit crass, but I am trying to take the most stereotypical ideas of what it means to be exotic, create creatures out of them, weave them into giant posters, and then I'm trying to sell all these creatures to the West. So I'm trying to sell my own culture like intentionally to the West, to try to kind of like have this conversation as well. Like, what does it mean that I'm only valuable to you when I'm a commodity, when my culture is commodity? And that started a lot of intellectual, well, not intellectual, but also discussions. Perhaps sometimes people, when they approach the artworks, it's like, oh, this is a very beautiful textiles. I've been to Malaysia before, but there's also some questions as well, like, what is this about? Well, it stems on this also, this thought that I have. A lot of the times, the way that I understand myself as Sarawakian is through the texts of and descriptions of the colonizers. They left a lot of descriptions for us, right? In the museums, you can find the descriptions. In papers, you can find the descriptions of who we are as a nation. And that's how the world digests us as a culture. I feel like it is some sort of like spite inside of me to also want to be able to sell myself, but this time at my own terms. Does it make sense? Yeah.
So you're trying to deconstruct colonization in a way. But something you said earlier on, which really made sense, right? Why do you want to design like a New Yorker when you're not from New York, from New York? And there's something like something to be proud of. Let's design from what we know and who we are. Just something you said that got me thinking. Now, Alena, you've often said that your music isn't about preservation but connection. So, how has your journey as a Sarawaki musician helped you navigate what it means to carry tradition into a modern world?
What it means to carry tradition into a modern world. Well, I always kind of steer away from the word preservation of culture because to me it just leaves, culture in a glass jar on a shelf in the museum, which has its purpose. But when I thought about it and looked back on what my great grandmother would have done is she would have learned a song from her elder and then changed the lyrics to adapt it to tell the story of her time. So she would have been very contemporary in her time as well. And that's what every generation of Kalabit and maybe Kenya people have done as well. They, learn something from the past and then tell the story of today. And then I thought about it with my cousins who I work with creatively as well. And we were like, hey, we should also honor our own generation. We were the first generation to be born outside of the rainforest. And still having very close roots to our Kalabit heritage, but at the same time, we grew up, with MTV, Astro, fashion magazines. So, I think at some point I probably felt like I had to be either this or either that. But then I think through this art, or through the music, I've really kind of reconciled that I am both, and my generation is both, and that's what we express through my music, through fashion, through music videos. And I realized that that is the reality and the truth for many Malaysians of my generation, which is why I guess people resonate with it, even though they don't understand Kalabit, even though they're not from a tribe where Sapet has been played. So that's, what was the question again?
I think you kind of get there. Now, how do you navigate what it means to carry tradition to a modern world?
Yes.
Yeah?
So for me, it's basically it's basically what my ancestors have done all the time. It's being contemporary, but
Right.
as an artist, we're all, as Marcus said, like we look at our past, we look at who we are, we look at the world around us, and
Right.
that's how we kind of communicate all those thoughts and all those emotions.
Right. Right. Okay. As for Datin, you've dedicated much of your work to revitalizing heritage and empowering artisans. For those of you who've been to the museum, of course, I love how you've curated that. What personal experiences led you to champion Sarawak's cultural legacy, and what does this leadership through heritage mean to you?
Alena, I agree with you that preservation of tradition should not be just, kept in a glass jar and that. Now, I fell in love with the Iban culture, the artifacts, the
You
craft.
fell in love with the Iban,
I fell in love with an Iban man.
I can tease him because I also know him from way back when. Okay.
Okay. So actually, I fell in love with the Iban man first, and he took me to the longhouse. But anyway, that's another story.
Well done, Dato.
You know how the whole crafting business came about? It was not intentional. Because we started the hotel, the Ranee, which is just across the river there, and out of the frustration of not being able to tell my guests in 2012 where to go to get authentic Sarawak handmade crafts, it was out of that frustration that I decided that I need to do something. I need to make something that is wholly made in Sarawak, authentically made in Sarawak by our people. And from that frustration, I basically took what the local artisans had and the Iban community. They are so talented. I tell you, our local Sarawakians are just very skillful and they are full of knowledge, unwritten, undocumented knowledge. It's incredible. Now, crafting, as I mentioned earlier, is really tied to the way we live, consume, and imagine our futures. But our craft at that time, okay, when I started, it really was not monetized. The baskets were made as a utilitarian product. You could buy a basket for like 10 ringgit, 5 ringgit in a market, which would have taken them hours or days to make, let alone harvesting the material. So then I decided that I want to be that bridge, okay? I want to be the bridge and the catalyst for our people. So we started as a commercial bridge by developing products with them and also to fuse traditional techniques with contemporary ideas to drive sustainable forward thinking design. Now, I love traditional crafts, but how many people on the global scale, global market, would buy into traditional crafts in a larger scale? So I decided to take that idea to ensure authenticity, ensure scalability for the community. We controlled the flow, the standards, the quality to justify the higher prices for the community. So, for example, these baskets, you would have seen them in lots of colors. We decided to make ours different. The market is very small. It is not about, for me, it's not about competing, but to complement and to find a niche where nobody is there. So to find my own space. And I told the Iban community, please don't compete with the Penang community. They have their own identity. We have our own. So we created these baskets. We are also bridging the past, right? To ensure, as I said, quality. And what we do with the community is we work with them so that the patterning is done by them. So it is their traditional patterns, but it is my choice of colors and it is my choice of style of the bag. So we still get them very involved in imparting their knowledge and skill of their patterns onto the bag. So I don't dictate patterning to them. This is also one way of safeguarding knowledge, right, for them. I do not go in and get them to produce as a manufacturing process. They are not my factory line. I want them to take ownership. They're custodians of their own heritage, their own cultural heritage. It belongs to them. And people ask me, oh, can you produce like 200, 300 baskets? No, we can't, because I teach them to harvest sustainably. This is not all plastic. The brown bits that you see is actually bamban. So I tell them that we want to put a bit of your material culture back into this. I'm not a big promoter of plastic bags, but I can't deny that it has infiltrated the communities because it's easy access, it's cheap, it's colorful, bright, they love it. But told them I still want them to put your material culture into this piece of craft. So Bamban is synonymous to the Iban community. If you look at their mats, tone on tone, they're all Bamban mats. The Penans tend to weave with rattan. So I said to them, put a bit of your material culture into this. So the whole idea is for us to bridge the past and the present, to adapt this form to our contemporary market. I'm not trying to do traditional, but I'm trying to take that traditional knowledge and do this. Another thing you would know, the Ibans are headhunters, right? Warriors. So they had this hat, the Selapok Tunjang, which is a warrior's hat. Now, who would wear this warrior's hat now in modern days, right? So we took this and we took the base of this. I'm not sure if you can see it, sorry. It's actually a ceremonial betel nut container. So we took the hat, the warrior's hat, and we took the betel nut basket, and we decided to fuse the two into a Selapok Gadis basket. So a modern basket, but using traditional skills, traditional item. Every layer has a meaning. Every point, the number of points has a meaning as well. But to take this, because when you buy into a piece of art, you're buying into the story of our nation, right? So whether you are from it, whether you're local, whether you're
Right.
from overseas, you're buying a piece of our Malaysian heritage.
Right. So, and I guess this is where it's available at the Ranee Artisan Gallery, right? How do you bridge the past and present? This is a way where you create livelihoods while also safeguarding their cultural identity.
Yes.
I'm going to move on a little bit about challenges and cross-sector collaboration, right? So, because each of your journeys shows how creativity can be a form of leadership, but beyond individual talent systems, from education to policy to market access, they all play a huge role in enabling the creativity to thrive. So let's talk about the broader ecosystems. And just looking at your story, I remember growing up, um, seeing these pieces, and then after they disappeared, all these little, so it's like it's more difficult to get because, and they were charging at a very low price. So obviously they can't survive on doing that, right? So and so I think that's where we need to talk about the ecosystem, right? So and know that we know that sustaining creative work requires more than passion. It needs platforms, policies, and partnerships. So, from your perspective, what are the biggest systemic gaps or opportunities in Malaysia's creative ecosystem? I'll start with you, Marcus, right? How can institutions better support emerging artists working with indigenous or experimental forms? And the fact that you're in Netherlands, maybe we can learn some things from them as well, right? Maybe you can share.
I started my career as a graphic designer. Wasn't really sure about the arts because of the commercial sustainability of things. I worked in a textile factory in the Netherlands, and when I was studying textile design, so I switched from graphic design to textile design at the last 2 years of my studies. I was also concerned, or like things that I was concerned about was about the sustainability of textile work in Sarawak. Like, how do you actually find a pathway for younger weavers to be able to find financial inspiration in how to move on with this craft? In the Netherlands, there's a textile museum where they also produce art, but it's also a museum. So that's where I first encountered a pathway on how this craft work could actually proceed. How do you kind of like preserve it, but also move forward with it? Um, in a weird way, my whole career is also my own experiment to see if it's possible for me myself to survive as a not only as like a producer but also currently as an artist. And the only thing I can do as a young person starting his career is just to try things out. And if it works out, then it could be an example of how the next generation can follow up with. I always think that the industrial weaving industry is what's currently happening. And I have been teaching in schools as well on industrial weaving. And you can see that younger audiences, they understand this language because they see opportunities in it. But also for the younger generation who are very deeply involved in the craft of weaving, they would automatically find their own way backwards into figuring out where does this start. And that's where perhaps the starting point can be. We always think of like the way that we teach weaving to be from the traditional way of weaving first in the industry, but perhaps it is a bit more fluid than we think. Some people that enter through industrial teachings, then they move into research. Some people move in, like for myself, start from research, moving into craft, then moving into industry. We could be a bit more open-ended and also a bit more open on how we involve younger audiences into the craft, if it makes sense. Yeah.
I guess I want to ask this question, right? You're of course you're now you've got a few exhibitions happening all over, but you're based in Netherlands. Why are you based in Netherlands? What are the opportunities open for you there that you are staying in Netherlands?
I think it's by chance
Okay.
because I graduated as a textile student,
Mm,
wanting to work in the textile factories.
right.
But it is because the Netherlands has a lot of museums
Okay.
and cultural funding that they were interested in my work enough that they were asking me for projects. And
Ah,
that's how it started.
cultural funding was my point lah. All right. Okay. So okay, Alena. So for you, what support systems or networks have helped you grow as a creative individual? They put here entrepreneur, creative individual.
I prefer the word creative individual. Scary being a creative entrepreneur. What networks and systems have supported me? Well, of course, I think first of all is family support. So I think I think mom and dad were probably really, really nervous when I, he's nodding, when I said I wanted to quit my corporate job and go into the arts. Really nervous, but still supportive. So I think that's very important. And as well, so family and friends, obviously, you know, my friends would all be coming to my shows at the very start. And then I think pre-COVID, there was more government support for individual artists. And I think during COVID, maybe it restructured a little bit. Now, cultural funding is quite difficult to get for an individual musician.
Right.
But yeah, I guess those are the things that really supported me at the start. And I would say that right now, what's needed more is funding always for the arts, but also just having for the government to have a long-term strategy for the arts. None of this 5-year business, you know, 10 to 20 years.
Right. To have that longer vision of where it's going to be. Okay, right. Interesting. And of course, corporations as well. I see you at events, you know, and they do appreciate that, which I find this great, right? I see you in events in KL. So, and in performing both locally and international, what moments have made you feel that your art is contributing to a larger Malaysian narrative, locally and internationally?
Locally, honestly, any event that I play at, I feel very blessed to be there because there's always people who have never seen a sapit before. In Sarawak or in West Malaysia or in Sabah, there are still people who haven't seen sapit before. So I always feel like, oh, it's, you know, today somebody has learned something or today somebody has felt something new from the music. Even at corporate events, you know. Internationally, again, people are so interested in sapit. They have seen a kora before, they've seen tabla before, but they've never seen sapit. Some of them don't know where Malaysia is. They don't know where Sarawak is. And again, like the music becomes kind of a conversation starter. And I think that's so powerful for Malaysia, you know? And I feel like there should be more opportunities and supports for musicians and artists to go overseas. I would say right now there's maybe just one fund that opens once a year for mobility, and that's not enough and not suitable for Malaysian artists, yeah.
Something you said, I mean, to have that long-term vision of where the creative economy is heading, right? I mean, beyond the arts, beyond just the whole creative economy, because I think we have wonderful talent here in Malaysia. So Datin, like how can public and private collaboration make cultural preservation economically sustainable?
I think public-private partnerships are a good way forward. Putting on my heritage hat now, basically, say for state-owned buildings that are of heritage value, but the government has no intention or no means to want to do anything with it, to bring in a private sector partner to do it is actually a very good pairing. And firstly, it ignites repurposing a building, conservation, repurposing. It is sustainable in the long run because you're not tearing down a building, so it's environmentally sustainable. The private sector will be able to run a business and make a business out of it because they come in as the commercial entity. And that's important because you need the money from that commercial aspect to be able to upkeep a building. Now, it's not cheap or easy to upkeep a heritage building. I know that because I run a hotel that sits in a building built in 1885, so 220 years old. And there is also not enough recognition for heritage buildings in Malaysia. Like, for example, we were the first recipient of the Edge Property Excellence Award in 2022. That was the first time that the Edge Property Malaysia actually recognized a Sarawak entity in their entire award, which I was quite surprised because we have great developers in Sarawak. None of them have ever been recognized. So they introduced a new category called adaptive reuse and repurpose. And we were the first to win that category for the Marion Boutique Lodging House together with Rex KL, which is an events-based. And this year, so proud to say, another Sarawak entity, the Old Courthouse under Food Journals in Riverheart, has just won it last week, I believe, the same category. Now, this shows that if we really work on this PPP, we call it, there are advantages to both public sector and private sector in preservation of heritage.
I'm going to open this question for all. How can education and mentorship nurture the next generation of creative leaders who understand both heritage and innovation? I'm looking at you, Marcus.
Education.
Yeah. How do you think, education, mentorship nurture the next generation, right? What are your thoughts? Having gone through it yourself, what do you see with the people now entering into this space? What do you think is required?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I play two roles. In school, I teach a more technical role. So a lot of topics about financial sustainability comes up. But also, when I teach students as well, I don't teach them to be artists, but I try to let them see opportunities outside of the arts as well. Perhaps if a student wants to develop into like more commercial product development, for example, with Nike, you need a lot of producers. The textile industry is very, very big. So beyond of what you see, what I do right now, there is a need for continuous innovation of textile work. In terms of arts, for example, I think there needs a lot more conversations on how we reflect on things. One thing that I've realized about myself when I first moved to Europe is that I was never trained to talk to myself. I was trained to be a graphic design advertising person, but in Malaysia, I think a lot of our education systems are training us to be workers. There was not enough space for us to think like, what is the purpose of me working so hard every single day? And of course, it's a very privileged place to talk about it because, of course, I moved to Europe. There's a lot of space for you to sit around and read philosophy books. There are people who can talk philosophy with you. But I think that more and more, I think there are more spaces now for people to be able to critically reflect on certain subjects. And that's also why I'm a big advocate for art spaces, museum spaces as well. It's not just about seeing beautiful things, but it's also a space for you to reflect upon perhaps certain things that you don't have the space in the day-to-day life to think about or to feel some sort of things. And for us to achieve that in terms of education, you do need a lot of moments of talking, a lot of moments of listening as well with students, where they are at, what they're concerned about. And when you're like not used to talking about your problems because you're only used to working, it is hard. Yeah.
Thanks. Datin, Alena?
I think art is really, knowing your soul and expressing your soul and communicating that to someone else, right? And I think that's really, I agree with Marcus, what's missing is that discourse. In South Korea, I read that they have, in primary school and secondary school, they have music appreciation classes compulsory in the syllabus. And in those music appreciation classes, they study traditional Korean music and K-pop.
K-pop,
Yes, and they learn to critique it. Isn't that amazing? And I think that's something that's really lacking here. Like, how do we talk about art? How do I know how to express like what I like about this piece, what I don't like about this piece? Why do I like this piece? I think that's very important and then what's lacking here in Malaysia.
Well, the creative syllabus is definitely missing from the education system. I think that's very clear listening to three of us. History and heritage needs to be actually taught in school. For example, in Sarawak, if you look back at the Dayak culture, which makes up the majority of population here, and architecture, longhouses. Why were they living in longhouses? Why were longhouses built on stilts? What was the way of life? That's all not taught in here. The Chinese community, the Malays. There's so much that needs to be taught. Under the Heritage Society, we actually tried to bring this out to the schools, to educate students in the schools. We tried to go into the government schools, but we didn't get the permission from the Ministry of Education to do that. So we went into the private schools, like Lodge School, and we did a talk on heritage and why heritage is so important. Now, education is really the foundation. See, this is at Lodge School. So we had about 200 students come and listen to us talk about heritage. So Yon is a lecturer from UNIMAS, and she talked about heritage. But education is of utmost importance. You need to start from young. You need to inculcate that appreciation, like what you said, Alena, not just for the arts and crafts, history, culture, music, heritage, the races. We've got 34 official races now listed in Sarawak. Do our kids know what the 34 races are? The backgrounds of these races, you know? Tolerance between the races, resilience. When my son was in secondary school, he organized for the history club and a visit to the longhouse. So we hosted them, they came to our longhouse. When the kids got off the bus, you could see they were like, uh-oh, can I go home? You know, you could see on their faces that they did not want to be there, they wanted to go home. And they looked in the rooms and they're like, no aircon? We're like, no aircon. Now, they were there for 3 days, 2 nights, or 4 days, 3 nights. We arranged for them to go to Fort Lily to see the fort. They had a trip up to climb Bukit Sadok, which some of them made it, some of them didn't, you know, city slicker kids. Some of them came down crying, some of them came down triumphant. But you know what was most important at the end of the trip? They were crying and hugging the host of the longhouse. They were so sad to leave because that sense of community and that warm welcome and how the Indai Apai treated them and warmly welcomed them into their houses. I think they didn't expect that. So I asked them, would you want to come back to a longhouse? And it was unanimous, yes, you see. But these are not taught in the schools and it's not taught in the books, right? Now you talk about mentorship. I think mentorship is also a very important way of educating not just school kids, people like myself. I have a mentor, and I am a mentor officially and unofficially to many in the creative industry. It is so important because it is a sense of reassurance. You know, even I didn't know working with the community now, this is my 9th year, whether I was heading in the right direction or not. You know, I needed a reassurance to say, yes, what you're doing is validated. Yes, it's worth it. Keep going even though it's so difficult and so challenging. Keep going even though you keep failing, because it is worth it when you see all these happy faces. And you know, they were so happy. This is a project that we did over COVID when everybody was in lockdown and we had to find ways to keep our crafting communities going. So we came up with this project of, we called it Bottle in a Hope. Hope in a Bottle, sorry, Hope in a Bottle. We collected discarded bottles from all the F&B outlets in Kuching, and we sent it up to the longhouse. And we told the whole longhouse, all of you just weave and weave whatever pattern you want. The young ones can do it, the old ones can do it, the men, the women, apai, aki, indai, init, whatever, weave. Every bottle that you weave, I'll pay you for it. And it was a great project. They all enjoyed it. They were so proud of it. This young boy taught himself how to weave. You know, he dropped out of school at 15. He didn't want to go to school. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to be a makeup artist. Of course, it's kind of frowned upon, right? A young boy want to be a makeup artist. He taught himself how to weave. So proud of him. So I said to the ladies in the Biro Wanita, please take him in as one of your members because he's keen, he's willing to champion the arts for the future generation. And this is what we need.
Right, great, right. And so it's also the whole thing about your kids going is experiential, right? I mean, if we talk about the arts, like we talk about food, we'll go very far. I'm just gonna go talk about now moving ahead. What's next for you, and what's next for Malaysia's creative future, and then we'll open the floor for questions, right? So, Marcus, after Kenyalang Circle, what do you see as the next chapter of your creative journey, and how do you hope it contributes to the larger Malaysian story?
I feel like in my career, what I'm privileged to be able to do is just to constantly reflect on where I am as a human being and try to explain that to humans, like other people, through my work. And I'm still just trying to figure things out. But not only in terms of career wise, but also like financial sustainability, teaching younger audiences as well. Yeah, there's this one thing about stories coming back to Kuching that it just popped out of my head. That I was also, I'm currently also very interested in curation, like ideas of how we curate things. And we had a walking session with some of the friends in Kuching from the house. I don't know if they remember it, but it's a long story, but I'll try. I grew up in Kuching with the long with the museum. What's it called again? Yeah, the old museum.
The old museum.
Yeah, and every single time I come to Kuching, I do my walks, and every single time there's always something that clicks in my head. It's like, oh, why has things changed? And I was talking to my friends that I felt a bit weird, right? When I grew up, the museum started first floor with the animals. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but it started with the animals, and then you go to the second floor, then you move into the crafts. But then nowadays, the animals are separated in a different building, and the crafts moved to the big building. And then the building itself became like a monument building that you can only enter by reservation. And it's all in this very small changes that you start to also find patterns on where we're heading. When I was young, going to the museum, of course, there's no word for curation. Like people decided on this, right? It's not professional curation, but you can clearly see that nature and human are intertwined. You experience nature first, and when you see the crafts, you see that the crafts are inspired by the animals. But then nowadays, when you look at the situation that we're in, we glorify the object. The animal is separated, and the building becomes a monument. And what does that mean? So these are all the small stories that I'm trying to bring up as a person who is trying to also figure out critically as well where we're heading next, right? It's in all these small decisions that perhaps affect me personally that I'm trying to bring up. Perhaps people can also kind of like reflect upon or it vibes with others, another person who's thinking about similar things. So that's what I'm trying to do every day when I wake up and walk, I guess.
Interesting food for thought, right? Having seen why this is changing. That's an interesting observation. Alena, so your art connects generations through song and story. What message would you share with young Malaysians about owning the roots while creating something new?
Owning their roots whilst creating something new. Well, I think that it's, not just young Malaysians, even old Malaysians. It's, you can do it at any stage of life. It's really our responsibility to carry our own heritage, because if we don't do it, who else is going to do it, right? And I think so often, especially in the music scene, because you want to be in the mainstream music scene, you have to be commercial to monetize your work. So you look at what works, and what works is basically Western forms of music, your verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus. But traditional music doesn't flow that way. So actually, I want to encourage, creators, young or old, to really think like, actually, for example, with music, what is our music form like? What is Sarawak music like? What is, in my case, what is Orang Ulu music like? It's verses, 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 and it doesn't have an ending. And how can I apply that to be a little bit commercial, but not too commercial? So still maintain kind of like the heart of it. And I think in my last album, I was trying to be a bit more commercial, which I'm glad I did. But I'm starting songwriting again, and kind of going through the process of deconstructing what it means to be commercial, going back to the roots. What is this song that I learned from my grand auntie, and how do we kind of express that so that people want to listen to it, but Kalabit still know that it's a Kalabit song. So that's what I'm working on, and I hope that others can also feel inspired to express their own heritage in a way that's authentic to them.
Right. I think staying true to yourself, the essence of who you are, Datin, you've worked with many artisans and young change makers. So what you showed us an example of that young boy just now. But what gives you hope about Malaysia's next wave of creative leaders?
So we're talking about the Gen Zs, and you and I are obviously not the Gen Zs because we're both here with our clipboard and paper. And look at these two; they have nothing. with them. So we belong to the same generation. But you know, the Gen Zs, they are digitally fluent, right? They are so fast and so good with their technology. Children these days are literally born with a device in their hands. Their unshakable cultural confidence. They're extremely proud of their culture and their roots, especially here in Sarawak during Gawai time. You see them coming full out in their costumes and regalia. And it just amazes me and amazes friends of ours who come from overseas and places like Singapore to see that our young people are still willing to come out all dressed up head to toe in traditional costumes. That's absolutely remarkable, actually, for Malaysia. Now, the Gen Zs want everything instant, immediate. They don't wait for approvals. They take whatever local heritage and they share it immediately, globally, Instagram, TikTok. What would take me 3 weeks, 4 weeks to complete with my weavers, they will just video that and convert it into a 1 minute video to storytell, you know, whereas here I am going up and down to the community doing that. So it's a good thing that they are able to do that and tell the story. There is obviously, you could say sometimes there's a clash between tradition and technology, but I don't think we should look at it as a problem. I think we should look at it as a sense of new energy, a vibrant energy. Make sure our ancestral stories are seen and heard and valued around the world. I told my 3 young girls from my office to come and listen because I'm fast speed mentoring them to take over. I said I wouldn't be there forever. You need to take over and take helm of your heritage. I've laid the groundwork, but you need to champion the heritage for your generation. I think the next generation, they're ready for the next chapter of our nation's history. We just need to give them a chance to do so.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our panelists. A round of applause there. I think each of you reminds us that the future of nationhood is creative, courageous, and collective. We can't do this alone. We're going to open the floor for reflections from the audience, questions. I know you're all dying to ask questions, right? Just raise your hand. Someone will come by. Takes one, right? It takes one, and then the ball will start rolling. Oh, Karen, no? Okay, volunteer or be voluntold, I always say, for people I know. Yes, come on. Yes, Dato, yes, Dato. YB, please bring the mic to YB.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to thank both the Petronas and Shell for being able to bring this because my wife stayed up to about 3 o'clock this morning to prepare.
Wow.
And I didn't sleep also. So. I think it's more like a comment, a response. I think just to introduce, I think Alena was saying that you need funding for a lot of things. Yeah. Fortunately, under our ministry, Youth Sports and Entrepreneurial Development, Sarawak, we have a Sarawak Youth Creative Industry Fund, which is for youth. You know, you can come up with something, and it's all online. SYCIF. You can find that online. That hopefully we can spur a lot more engagement, preservation, and to sustain something. I think that's the word now, sustainability. So we thank you. You know, I think secondly, I agree. There's not much discourse about what you want to do, and you know, there's no. Last time you used to have some kind of gathering together just to do things. I think what Alena was saying, you just get your friends around, just play sape and all that. Right. It's lacking that. But then again, because of technology, this is where you need to blend in. So culturally, we need to adopt to what it is now. Like not us last time, Freda, right? We've been used to go dancing with her last time.
Back in the day.
What we need to do more, I think this is where I believe in anything we do is the support from everyone, from the community and all. That will keep it going. If there's not enough support for it, it can easily die off because there's a lot more interesting things on your phone, on social media you can do now. But then again, you have to understand where we come from. If you know your roots, then if there is no culture, there's no heritage, there is no whatever it is, we are not what we are today. So I think that's something that we have to come back and look into and, support. So I congratulate the three of you, including Freda also, for them, for coming out, for bringing in. And so please don't stop what you do, okay? So, I'm just telling my wife so she don't disturb me. So that's why I'm asking her not to stop. But don't bring too much junk home, okay? So once again, I also thank you, those that organized this. Probably we can have some more collaboration. I don't mind getting a lot more youths to come in and be involved in this kind of thing. I think that's where we need to keep the discourse going and preserve what we have, because Sarawak is such a beautiful place. Why? Because of our diversity and the unity in it. So, use it to the best of our ability to make everybody happy. I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, YB, Dato Gerald Jabu. All right. Thank you for sharing. And just go to the website, don't come to him. Anybody else would like to come? Yes.
This is a question maybe to the floor, but more for Datin, Rosemarie and Marcus. Marcus, you talked about decolonization, and I've been at UNIMAS doing a PhD since 2012, and I never entered any discussions about decolonization. And I'm wondering if there is a fear of history and looking back in Sarawak, and if that's the reason why we don't have chairs of history at our 5 or 6 universities in the state. And how important is this for cultural knowledge, for heritage, for museums, that people are not studying history? I mean, maybe it's something larger than, relating to the humanities as a whole. But in order to know the future, you have to know the past. So it's a question for the panel, but also other people in the room.
No, I can only speak from my experience. I grew up in Kuching thinking that I would not be able to be as smart as a white person or as successful as a person from a developed country. And I feel like when you are putting yourself in that position, it is very, very, very hard for you to be able to see yourself as an equal. It was only in the Netherlands that after many, many years of sitting with also other people who are doing the colonial work, that I realized that, oh, okay, there is a value in your positioning on where you place yourself. When I first encountered the word decolonization, I've encountered it in a museum. When I had to explain to my teachers what it meant for me, couldn't find the words, can only cry. Because the first thing that I actually felt with the word was that I have finally found a word that describes what it meant to feel pain inside my body, right? I always thought when I was growing up, what does it mean to be Sarawakian? It means that you are in a developing country. It means that you have to travel out. It means that you have to go to the West. It means that your parents have to work so hard to be able to eject you out of this country so that you have a chance to survive. And it's not words that come to my brain, but images of my friends who are still trying to eject themselves out. And how do you kind of describe that? That's the hard part. And that's where the work becomes very complicated. When I come back to Malaysia as well, I also try to find a way when we have to talk about decolonization to also be responsible with how we navigate that conversation. I don't feel like it's fair for me to come over here, throw out the word decolonization, and then leave for the Netherlands, because someone has to digest what it means to be stuck in that situation while I leave for the Netherlands. So perhaps what I'm trying to propose is that it is just not an easy topic to access. It's not the same when you don't feel the pain. Perhaps it's just too hard to open up the conversation, if it makes sense. And I feel like it needs a bit of like empathy, of trying to slowly open up that conversation, because there is a lot to unpack and also a lot to process. And someone has to stay with the students to be able to make sure that they're okay, if it makes sense. So perhaps that's why it's a bit hard.
Thank you. Anything to add? Yeah.
Well, for me, I'll just talk about the heritage side of it and the colonial past. The question has popped up, and I wondered whether partly why we don't want to save the buildings in Sarawak or Malaysia is because we want to tear away from colonial days. That question has popped up many times. Is it because we want to disassociate ourselves with that? But history is history. You can't change it. You can't rewrite it. You don't have to glorify it, but it's something that you cannot change. And we have to accept that we are here today because of that journey, whether you like it or not, wrote by the British, wrote by the White Raja. You can either look at it negatively and say, oh, we were colonized, or you can look at it positively and say they brought a lot of change and advancement to the state in those days, from the trading routes to architecture, medical history, so many ways development. So I think it is your outlook on it. I would like to think that with the heritage buildings, we can, we will, and we should save it. Because these monuments, buildings, will eventually be what's left standing to tell the story for the future generations.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Anyone else would like to quip in? Yes, there's somebody right at the back waving.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Freda Liu, and I'm actually from Pontianak, Indonesia. So first of all, I would say that Malaysia is definitely a source of inspiration, and there are a lot of meaningful connection that we have between those countries, especially that we are in the same island. And as a Gen Z myself, we grapple with misinformation and hatred in many ways because of the digitalization. In this sense, I would like to have your view on how do you use your art to go beyond border and to have the presence that is meaningful in the digital world. Thank you.
How do I use my art to go beyond borders? It's so ironic because if you look at our village, for example, so I have songs that are very specific to Long Peluan, and the population of Long Peluan is a few hundred people only. And people around the world want to listen to it. That's, for me, that's just crazy. And I really think that when you kind of, as an artist, you know what you want to create and you always yearn to create something, it just needs to be done. But that also, it doesn't just come overnight, you know, it takes a lot of practice. Ed Sheeran says he creates 200 bad songs before he has a hit song. So I think as an artist, there's a lot of discipline. There's a lot of discipline behind the work, behind the practice. There's a lot of strategy also, especially in the digital world, right? How do you release this? What do you put out? What's the visuals? What's the narrative behind it? And then it's also, well, I only have this much funds to do this project. How do I get the best out of it? So there's a lot of kind of, and there's a lot of research as well. There's a lot of research into what this word means, how to pronounce this word correctly. What is the story that I want to tell? So there's all that goes into creating one song. And I think when you do your best, When you do your best, if you have a good piece, if you have a good piece of art, if you have a good piece of craft, if you have a good piece of music, with the digital world now, it can cross borders quite easily. And I think, especially with Pontianak, can we share so much culture? I also learned so much from our Pontianak brothers and sisters. So I think it's really kind of taking advantage of the digital world, not necessarily jumping on trends, but kind of delivering your message with a good intention and good strategy behind it.
Thank you. If you have anything to add, yeah.
I think I'm going to address a tiny bit about, you mentioned social media being confusing. I think that's a very interesting observation as well. I think especially for like the younger generations that's a bit more well versed with social media. But that's also why I feel like it is critically important to be able to train independent minds on how we experience things. I have this feeling that because we're so used to seeing the same content, that we find that we convince ourselves that that the content that we see online is the truth, whereas we stop processing the critical thinking of our heads, right? Like the example that I gave you just now with the Borneo Culture Museum, for example. Like if a Borneo Culture Museum is made, that means that this is important. Like the craft work is important, and the animals are not included in the new museum. So that means that maybe the animals are not important. But that for me, in terms of critical thinking in the culture, is what I'm trying to also bring up to the audiences, perhaps in Sarawak and this part of the world as well, that you are also allowed to consider things that you experience in your day-to-day life, to consider questions. And the more questions you kind of like encounter and the more questions that you digest, perhaps the more complications you can kind of manage with like navigating with social media, right? I think that that's also where it becomes fun. It becomes like, oh, I'm looking at content. How do I critically kind of digest it? Perhaps that is also a skill that the next generation needs to figure out, especially, for example, with the AI coming up. I think there's a lot of interesting areas to kind of like talk about in this field, but you kind of, I guess, get my point.
I'm going to ask, usually I said, is there one final question? And then suddenly the hands all come up. Is there one final question from the floor?
Hi, good afternoon, evening, perhaps. My name is Lucille. I'm from Punggol, Borneo. So probably this question will be for all three of you. How do you overcome black lashes comments, or if there's any production that might or might not become misunderstood as culturally appropriation, especially on music, because we always touch on contemporary pieces. So how do you guys overcome? How do you tell the world? Thank you.
So, you know, some people would just think some things are cultural misappropriation. So how do you handle comments or something like that? Yeah. Mhm.
How do you handle the
How do you
comments?
handle
And how do you explain to the world that what is you doing? What are things that you're trying to do is preserving while promoting the culture? How do you do that?
Okay, for me, as I mentioned earlier, the community are the custodians of their culture. I'm not the custodian of the culture. I'm only the enabler, right? So it is very important to understand the way of life of your community that you're working with. I know you work with communities as well, Lucille. But to understand their culture and their heritage. For example, we talked about the Puak Kumbu textiles. There are certain motives on that are sacred, right? So as a contemporary designer, oh yeah, great, I can do t-shirts, I can do hats, I can do bags, I can do shoes. But you need to know and understand that there are certain motives from this textile or from the community that you cannot put, say, on your shoe, because that's really bringing it down to the level of the floor and giving it disrespect. So you need to understand that. And I think dialogue with the community is very important. Respect for the community and the people, the craftsmen, the artisans, that's very, very important. Now, backlash you will always have. There will always be people who will be negative about what you do. There will always be people who try and take you down. There'll always be people who copycat what you're doing. But I think if you stay true to your vision and your mission in what you want to do, and you're honest in the way that you have this relationship with your community, then I don't think you should let the backlash or the negative comments stop you or pull you down, right? I always say, yes, there'll be moments where you need to go into a room, cry your eyes out. That's okay. That's okay to do that. But come out and then re-look at the situation, reanalyze the issues, and how can you make it better from there?
Thank you. Anybody like to?
I really want to know from the
Yeah.
from your side on the graphic design.
How do you handle negativity?
Yes.
Well,
is-
I'm gonna address the cultural appropriation first. I guess when it comes down to a lot of my works, my focus is on the questions and perhaps the more questions that come out from the questions. And I think that's what's interesting for me, right? When I put up a project into the world, questions come out like, are you culturally appropriating as well? And those are the things that perhaps in the art world is more interesting for me. Like, how do we continue on that conversation? And it's like an intellectual ping pong that you continuously go on. And I think that that's more important for me in the arts than to just say like, this is the end, right? It's a close-ended statement, right? You're culturally appropriating. It's close-ended. But like when you keep the conversation going as a ping pong, we progress on that thought. So I think that that's how I would position myself. But it's also very specific. I mean, I'm an artist, so I can place myself there. If you are perhaps using a different business model, for example, with Datin, then perhaps the experience is a bit more different as well. So it depends. But for me, my positioning is always focusing on the questions and also having the dialogue. I don't think that it's fair if you just put up a project, people are angry at you, and then you just stop the conversation. So perhaps that's also where it's a chance for you to be able to understand why people are angry, perhaps, right? If they don't care, that's bad. If they're angry, at least there is something within that conversation, perhaps, that we need to address on. And that's always very interesting for me because people are thinking, they're feeling, then you can progress. And it's better than not caring at all, if it makes sense. But moderation is important, I think. Finding the right moderator to be able to navigate, it's a tough skill to have. That's something that I've learned throughout my years. People like to speak, but not a lot of people like to moderate.
Thank you.
Being in kind of this field of world music is quite complex, I think, when it comes to cultural appropriation. Because on one hand, obviously you want to share the music, but sometimes you get some people who are like, oh, how come Kalabit can sing Kenya song, you know? But then you know, in the past we all lived next to each other and we all learned from each other's cultures. We all learned from each other's weaving. We all learned each other's music. We all learned from each other, and I think that's what Sarawak is, you know? And so whenever I write something or before releasing something, I would work with my cousins. So Josh is my music producer, or I work with Sarah on some music videos, and we really go deep into thought on, are we representing this in the right way? Are we harming any communities by doing this? If we're not sure, number one, we will ask elders. So for example, for Warrior Spirit, I think I ended up wearing 12 different outfits, contemporary outfits with kind of traditional elements to them. And one of the outfits, we wanted to wear this beautiful yellow puak kumbu that was hand woven. And I thought, hey, you know, I know some Iban people say that we're not supposed to wear puak kumbu, simply wear lah, you know. So we checked with some Iban elders and they were like, some said can, some said cannot, so we just didn't do it. We just left it out. And you know, the purpose of the music video was still translated even without doing that. So we're very careful not to harm anyone or harm any community. Even with the Kalabit songs or Kalabit representation, we will ask our elders. There's a lot of layers of process and thinking that goes behind it. And at the end of the day, I think it's really come down to intention and what is it that you really want to communicate? Do you have to do it that way? Can you do it another way? And we learn so much in the process. And I always say that, after releasing one song or after releasing one music video, we've all grown so much as artists and as people. We just learned so much about our culture and other cultures as well.
Thank you. My final question to all of you to close off, right? Imagine Malaysia in 20 years. What would you want the next story of nationhood to look like? I'll look at Alena, perhaps I'll get you to answer first.
Our next story of nationhood, actually, I'd really love. Next 20 years, okay. Next 20 years of Malaysia, I'd really like our story of nationhood to really kind of be rooted in arts and culture. I think right now it's there on the surface, it's there in tourism, but I would love for all of us to really know our own heritage and our own culture deeply and to know each other's culture deeply. And I really think that, I really, truly, really believe that that is the path to peace.
Yep. Datin?
In terms of handicrafts and what we do
in any way.
and heritage, I would like to think that we could rebrand Sarawak or Malaysia and to design a shared look that belongs to all Malaysians, a modern Malaysia and a united one.
I think perhaps my work as well, hopefully in the 20 years, is to be able to have Sarawakians feel like they are valuable, that they feel at peace at where they are in terms of what they say and have the confidence to talk, I think.
Right.
That's like the slow progression. Like when you talk about decolonization, that is the work. It's not so much about finding, like, how do you call this, like revenge. It's really about figuring out again, where do I stand in my own country and finding my own value as well. And I feel like that's something that we are working on. Like
Right.
even with like preservation, doing it at your own terms, doing your own music. I think it's a slow progress, but hopefully in 20 years, you have like 50 more people on stage. It'll
Right.
be fun.
Right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, when I think of the music and arts and all that, right? When you look at art, you question things, but it's a much better way of expressing yourself than through wars. When you listen to music, right, it unites you. You don't need to know the words; you can just feel it, right? I think that's what I like to see, and that's what the creative industry does, right? It connects us, and that's the vision I hope we have for Malaysia, right? So thank you again. And as we close, I'm reminded that our culture is more than just heritage to be preserved. It's the living, breathing foundation of nationhood. It is through our tradition, our arts and stories that express our values, identity, and collective dream of who we envision to be. So Sarawak, with its vibrant tapestry of the Ibans, the Bidayus, the Orang Ulu, and Kelabit are among the many indigenous ethnic groups in Sarawak, each with their own rich culture and traditions, reminds us diversity is not something to manage, but a strength to build on. Through creativity, leadership, and innovation, heritage can be a driving force for collective progress. And each thread and note we've heard today from Marco weaves, right? Alena's songs, Datin Rosemarie's works are strands of the same national fabric. So they remind us that to love Malaysia is to keep creating Malaysia. And so our ancestors gave us the stories, our generation gave them voice, and together we're weaving the next story of who we are and who we can be. So thank you. I'm very honored to be here, very proud to be doing the Borneo Talks here as a Sarawakian. So on that note, thank you. And as maybe continue to honor our past while daring to dream our shared future. So back to the MC. Thank you, and a round of applause for our panelists.